Welcome to The Nation. I'm JESSY CHAHAL. As global trade evolves, Malaysia is working to stay competitive and strengthen ties with key partners, especially the United States. Now, from shifting supply chains to calls for fairer trade terms, the focus is on attracting quality investment and driving long-term growth. Well, lucky for us today, in the studio joining me is none other than DATO SIOBHAN, CEO of the American-Malaysian Chamber of Commerce, with key insights on the future of Malaysia-U.S. trade. Welcome, Dato, to have this conversation with us. Indeed, we are excited as well. So much has been debated about, speculated about, and talked about in terms of and on the back of what has happened with the U.S. tariffs. Let's begin with the bigger picture at this point. How would you describe the current global trade and investment climate, especially from AmCham's perspective?
Well, I think it's one of the most dynamic and progressive kind of spaces right now. Obviously, everything is going to be in flux, so everybody is kind of waiting and watching. But that doesn't mean that businesses are slowing down either. There's actual, activity going on because it has to. Businesses go on, the world turns, and we need to be able to make sure that Malaysia is part of that turning and evolving world. So I'd say it's a really interesting time. I think Malaysia has a lot to offer, and the dynamic is going to slowly settle, and the question is, where is Malaysia in when it starts to settle?
And that's a big question. You say it's business as usual and Malaysia has a lot to offer. On that, and with global supply chains shifting as well as trade strategies being redefined at this point, what unique strengths does Malaysia have or that it can offer to continue to attract American MNCs?
Well, the first thing I think we need to understand is that Malaysia's place in the ecosystem, especially U.S. global value chains, is built on 50 years of collaborative trust relationship where businesses have worked together to build this ecosystem out, and it has evolved through sheer hard work without the benefit of an FTA. So there's a lot that can be done from a position of strength. We are central in the ASEAN region. We command a position that is envious to many parts of the world, with 670 million people. Actually, not just a gateway, but we are at the center of it. So how do we leverage some of that? So how do we make sure that whatever we're offering can sustain some of that? We also have an ecosystem, as I mentioned, built up by many years of working together. It is one that delivers high quality. It's one that has skilled workers in it. So these are really central to Malaysia's offering. We also have a lot of innovation that goes on, because over the 50 years, the relationship has evolved, manufacturing has evolved, and there's innovation on the manufacturing floor. R&D has come here, so we have a lot of that going on as well. But one of the most critical parts is the fact that we actually have a system in Malaysia that works at a global level. So every Malaysian company that's here is qualified to work in an American company, is qualified to work globally. So that intrinsic strength is incredible, and FDI likes to land here because of the ability to plug teams in. Our ability to speak English is absolutely paramount in that, because business can land and start very quickly to interact with their whole global team. So there's a lot that we could be looking forward to, but really it's based on that trusted relationship.
You speak of the ecosystem. How has that ecosystem been disrupted, or have we seen any disruption since the announcement of the US tariffs?
I think there's been not so much disruption as it has been a doubling down in some respects, because there's going to be challenges, but there's also opportunities. And because we can deliver at a global level, there's a lot of opportunities for local SMEs, local MSMEs as well, to actually deliver more for the rest of the world. So it's the diversification of the markets. How do we actually look at Malaysia not just in relationship to the United States, but in relationship to the rest of the world?
Yeah, you mentioned and emphasized the link between MNCs and Malaysia's local SME ecosystem, which is a strong ecosystem on its own. How does this synergy help to strengthen Malaysia's case for deeper trade integration with the US?
I think it's just that. It's that trust. So having worked and grown together as part of building the ecosystem, there is not just a relationship, but it's also built on systems and processes, security, compliance, there's a knowledge of how each other works. And I think that knowledge gives comfort to the trade relationship. And that comfort is something that can be taken into the discussions by the Malaysians. And also, I think, during COVID, we proved ourselves to be a resilient and reliable partner. We were able to make sure that supply chains didn't break down, and the ability for us to actually make sure that the global supply chain, the global value chains kept going. There's a respect and resilience that is on from both sides. So I think these are things we need to build on, and to make sure that Malaysia really kind of grows from that base and use that as a starting point for the discussions on the trade relationship.
Now, we speak of a starting point. Of course, this year Malaysia is the ASEAN chair as well. Where does AmCham weigh into being a vocal partner towards having more trade discussions and more activity within ASEAN?
Well, we don't specifically speak on ASEAN itself because our membership base is very much based in Malaysia, and we're talking about the bilateral relations a lot more. But Malaysia's voice in ASEAN is absolutely critical, because this is an opportunity not just to speak on behalf of the nation, but also how the whole region can fit into the global trading system. And yes, there's going to be fluxes and changes, but nonetheless, ASEAN is a very important position for the globe. 670 million people, it's a marketplace as well. It's not just a center for manufacturing.
Right.
There's a marketplace. How do we help other ASEAN countries come and develop their market, as well as how do we support their industries as well? So these are really important things to think about, and I think Malaysia is at a fantastic position this year as ASEAN chair to really enable some of that.
So based on what you've shared, that the bilateral relationship and ties are fairly strong, and they have had a history as well. But amid all this rising trade tension, particularly now under Trump's administrations with his tariff approach, how resilient is this bilateral ties or relationship in terms of the strength it has to weigh out the current uncertainty until we reach a point of an understanding or proper negotiation?
I think resilience is part of Malaysia's hallmark. We've seen it over the years that it's been consistently resilient, and not just from its own ecosystem itself. I mean, we've moved from commodities to manufacturing to services, so we've got a very diverse base here, and that trust, again, I go back to confidence and trust in that ecosystem. When we go and negotiate and we go and talk to them, it's bringing those values out and bringing the fact that they're common goals. We both want to see each other succeed. And yes, it might be a little bit anxious at the time, but ultimately, if we know what we want at the end of the day, if Malaysia knows where it wants to go and what it wants to be, and we can see where the synergies are for where the US wants to go, it's working in that common space. And how do we move forward to actually get to that space, in that common space? So it's increasing our competitiveness, it's building on the trust that we have. There's a lot that we can be doing to secure that ecosystem that works not just for Malaysia, but for the US as well and other countries.
You also mentioned strategic investment. What sort of sectors or areas, industries, do you think that this will be attractive for that?
Well, Malaysia has seen a tremendous amount of investments from the United States, especially in the last 2 to 4 or 5 years. Almost all of them are in high-value jobs, in high-value tech sectors. So you've got the E&E industry, including semiconductor, which is exploding. You've got the medical device area, chemicals, ICT, and of course the digital overlay right across that, digitization that's driving AI and everything else. So all the investments from the United States pretty much lie in this high-tech, high-value space, and I think that's going to continue. So are there opportunities for more industries to grow from that base? Aerospace is one of them. I think Malaysia is one of the few countries that have experience in dealing with critical minerals and rare earths. So we have to explore what the new opportunities are, and we should be exploring them together as well. And so I think there's a lot of stuff that we can be working on, a lot of industries and really sectors where we can try and open up and say, does this work with the ecosystem, which is highly specialized, high quality, and with a very skilled workforce that can dive deep into delivering that kind of high growth areas.
Mm-hmm. In terms of low-hanging fruit, what do you see there's something that can, happen or materialize in the near future, the next 3 to 6 months, within a year?
Well, I think the government's approach right now has been extremely pragmatic, and I think it's they're taking the right approach in understanding what the US needs, understanding what our needs are, and kind of trying to formulate what is the offering for a business match, and seeing, and that's very pragmatic, and I congratulate the government for doing that. But I think there's things that we could be doing ourselves. What can we touch? I mean, it's not about leaving it up to the government to do everything. It's what can we do as and on the ground here to make ourselves more competitive, to actually understand what we have in Malaysia, to make sure that we are focused on those high value areas, so that we're bringing in the right investments into the right sectors, lowering the attrition. I mean, we all have barriers to not just to trade, but just to operating. So how can we lower that noise level, speed up our approvals, make the permitting process much more efficient, so that businesses can act faster, be more agile, and be able to bring the strengths to bear in a timely fashion that makes Malaysia more competitive. Malaysia being more competitive makes it much more attractive to investments, not just from FDI, but also DDI. So how do we bring that all together?
Well, it looks like AmCham is already inundated with many tasks to ensure that all of this is on the ground smoothly. What are some of the initiatives or projects that are running at this point of time in terms of business matching or trying to iron out some of these creases?
Well, I think Malaysia's been very lucky. I think in some respects it's kind of been dodging for a long time. We have a lot of structures within the Malaysian space that bring businesses and government together to look at inefficiencies, to try and cut through them. So I think we just need to ramp some of that up. So we have areas like, initiatives like Pemuda and in the past MyMuda, to bring out the areas that are in fact impacting businesses. So how do we do that faster? How do we talk to government? We talk, we, as a chamber, we try and ask our members what's going on in your world, what's your business footprint, but what's your business model and how is that evolving? And we try and take that information and give it to the government, share with them where we think Malaysia can operate as a partner in business, and then let them make informed decisions about how they want to structure the policies and the environment for it to be a fertile ground for investments.
What has been some of the feedback from some of those that you've spoken to in terms of, for example, on the back of the announcement of the US tariffs from the members themselves, what has been some of their grievances or perhaps even some word of encouragement that they have shared?
Well, I think everybody's just waiting to see where that space is going to land, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of uncertainty, but at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity. I'm hearing not just from our members, but from the ecosystems. Malaysia is there's opportunities where they're growing. There's a lot more exports going on. So there's a lot more investments coming in from different parts. Malaysia is in a very strong position, or should I say a better position than some. So how do we take advantage of that? How do we grow from that advantageous position? How do we consolidate it? And I think these are the conversations, and we're having them with government to say, okay, what do we need to do? How do we make it better? And it's not just for the US companies, it's for Malaysian companies. And what are the opportunities for us to then take Malaysian companies abroad and be that investor to the region, the countries around us, or even beyond?
From your experience and observation, what is the most attractive strength or value or industry Malaysia has outside looking in?
It's that ecosystem. Mm-hmm. It's really the depth and the robustness of that ecosystem. That is not just it's not just the capex and the vol. It's the people that's in it, the actual workings of it that works at the tier 1 level around the world. Malaysia is because they're globally integrated. So any Malaysian company that works with a US company and is qualified works at a global level. They can actually export and they can work with any of the US companies around the world. So using that base as a globally integrated supply chain is probably Malaysia's biggest strength, and the fact that it's built on a trusted relationship, not just in technology, we can double down on that, but also in compliance and understanding the processes.
Well, you know, as you've mentioned, Tier 1, and it sounds great, you know, almost hit the ground running, infrastructures in place, you have the human capital, and you have the technology or the expertise. But that's also, you know, vis-a-vis being called a developing country. How do we make sense of that?
Well, this is where the work of the government also comes into bear. And, you know, the companies and industry can do so much, but it also means working with the government to make sure that we can bring in the rural areas so that they have access to some of the trainings that we have. And I think the Malaysian government's putting in really interesting opportunities for the skilled workforce, or the workforce to become skilled. So TVET's growing, focus on education, you know, so that the industry and the educational institutions are closely better linked. I think we need to work on that. This is not that we have it all. It's a continuous improvement process, and I think that's the benefit of being in Malaysia, the fact that you can actually have those conversations and actually build on continuous learning.
Well, recently you mentioned that AmCham's engagements with the US and Malaysian governments often happen behind closed doors. Give us context and perspective on what you meant by that, but also what's the tone of those conversations?
I think one of pure collaboration. I mean, the reality is that my members are willing to share information, but oftentimes it's not public. It's stuff that we can actually talk about in small groups and be able to be very candid in our assessments and give that information to the government. So a lot of it does happen behind closed doors so that we can have that level of candor. If we can be open, honest, transparent, and clear in the needs and in the wants, and what the offerings can be, then the government has a much more informed decision-making process. So I think I'm a real fan of working alongside and with government, alongside with our members, and making sure that the government really hears what's going on.
And has there been much exchange, or has there been more red tape?
No, I would say that the government has been very open and continuously engaging to try and to hear. I mean, obviously, sometimes it's hard to get a meeting, but, you know, they're busy too. So we have to kind of give them a break too.
Right. So AmCham says it's preparing for a door knock in Washington come July this year. What trade and investment priorities will be on your agenda?
So when we go to Washington on a door knock, it literally is that. We go in and we take the perspectives of our countries in Asia. This year we'll have, I think, between 12 or 15 countries represented on this particular door knock. So we take kind of the Asian perspective, what's going on in Asia, and we talk to industries and the US administration and be able to try and explain what's happening here on the ground in the most candid way, so they again understand what's happening here. From Malaysia, I'll be carrying Malaysia's water about why we matter into that space. But it's also a really interesting opportunity to meet with other stakeholders, where we can kind of talk about what Malaysian companies can offer and where the synergies can happen. So this is a really interesting opportunity where the US has invested in Malaysia for 50 plus years. Is this the opportunity where I can now start talking, or the AmCham can start talking to other stakeholders about what Malaysia can do to support this growth or this rejuvenation of manufacturing in the United States? In terms,
or in other words, a reverse of investments?
Well, it's a shared and mutual beneficial environment. You know, we're working at the same level, Tier 1. So where is that exchange? Is it an opportunity for us to invest in Malaysia, from Malaysia to the United States? What are the skill set that we can offer in support of the Trump administration's desires to move?
Right, and as we know, things change, you know, on a day-to-day basis, and we're about 90 days away from that door knock visit in July. But what would be your sort of introduction or summary, so to say, when you present Malaysia's case forward?
Well, I go back to what we talked about earlier, the fact that we are a long-standing, trusted environment that has worked very hard with US industry to build an ecosystem that not just is for Malaysia, but for the US business and economic ecosystem. So by presence here, we are a launch pad for the United States as well. It's important for Malaysia's FTAs and the opportunities that being in Malaysia presents. So how do we blend that together, and how can we work together to make sure that we have our mutual interests at heart, and how do we move the policies and everything else forward to achieve that.
Right, and on that note, everything's been on a good footing so far,
Yeah.
but what reforms would you say needs to be introduced or put in place so that we could be a more strategic partner to US businesses?
I think it's lowering the barriers to efficient trade and efficient operations here. So it really kind of taking the opportunity to double down on what we're already doing, driving competitiveness within Malaysia, making sure that our business processes, our rules and regulations are not just efficient, but they're also they double down on efficiency, on clarity. They're not held up by red tape. And I think we can do a lot more with that. And it's already ongoing. Please don't get me wrong. This is an ongoing process, and Malaysia has already started. It has started before the Trump administration. Now we just have to speed it up so that we can meet the need and the challenges that is present now.
There's a lot of things happening simultaneously. And of course, I don't envy your position at this point either. But we go back to Malaysia chairing ASEAN. How can this help to balance our regional leadership responsibilities in terms of bilateral trade, especially with a major partner like the US?
Well, I think the bilateral trade between the nations is something that we also need to look at as well. How are we trading with the other ASEAN countries? What can we leverage from each other? And if we can strengthen what's happening within the region through ASEAN, whether it be in the movement of goods, people, or services, that makes ASEAN a much stronger offering. And you've got 670 million people. We want to be able to not just use them as a workforce, but also as a marketplace. So as a marketplace for the United States to export as well, this is an interesting space for them. It's also a launch pad to the rest of the world. So how do we take what we're doing here in ASEAN and take it into the rest of the world? And I think Malaysia has those opportunities.
Right. The global trade and investment trends and marketplace, they are ever evolving.
Ever.
And from that, are you anticipating any new trends perhaps in the upcoming next 1-2 years, especially in terms of this side of the world in Asia Pac?
You know, the businesses are as old as the ages, right? The trends, it's all about global supply chains. And I think the trend is how resilient you're going to be, how agile can you be. And the countries that I think that can be agile and resilient are the ones that are going to kind of make progress in the ever-evolving world.
Mm-hmm. Just to sort of throw this question in there as well,
Sure.
What if during that door knock visit in July, Malaysia's arm is a little twisted in terms of some of the discussions? What would be your position then?
I go back to, I think the relationship is much more balanced than people realize. And I think that there's going to be a lot that Malaysia can legitimately offer in being a trading partner and a resilient one as well. We've proven our worth. We've proven the fact that we can be resilient. We've proven the fact that we are trustworthy. We need to double down. I'm not saying we have to say this, we're done. There's a lot more that can be done to strengthen that trusted relationship, strengthen the efficiencies and the competitiveness. But I think Malaysia needs to understand what it wants to be at the end of all this. In 10 years' time, where does it want to be? And then focus on what does it need to do today, tomorrow, and in, say, 3 to 5 years. But first, we've got to get past this moment in time, but it needs to have a very clear idea of where it wants to be. And I think this future is bright if we can get that right.
The Future is bright for the nation, and as Malaysia works to deepen its trade ties with the United States, the future of this partnership will depend on mutual trust, progressive policies, and the agility to navigate a fast-changing global economy. Thank you, Dato, for weighing in and spending some time with us here today. I'm Jessie Chahal. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.